Coming to you from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, this is the Spit Sports Show. I really, from the bottom of my heart, hope that you guys enjoyed those first two NFL games of the season as much as I did, because I don't think there's a better way to start off the NFL season than two one-possession, tight games throughout. I thought both games were incredibly entertaining from first kickoff to last possession. But I want to start real quick with the Ravens versus Chiefs on Thursday night, because everybody's talking about the general stories that were prone to come out of this game. Patrick Mahomes beats Lamar Jackson again. Do the Chiefs have the Ravens number? Xavier Worthy, the fastest man in the history of football. Is he going to be a game changer for this Kansas City Chiefs offense? But to me, the story of this game was not about any players or anything like that, really. It was about the coaching of the Baltimore Ravens, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. And I think what this can teach us is that coordinators moving around, especially coordinators that move on to get head coaching jobs, are a much bigger loss for these teams than we acknowledge during the offseason, because everybody acknowledged and understood that Mike McDonald last year did a fantastic job as the Ravens defensive coordinator. They had a bit of a lack of talent on defense, at least compared to years past, and yet and still he led them to the number one scoring defense in football, and overall maybe the most dominant defense in the NFL next to the San Francisco 49ers. But for some reason, we thought coming into this year, just because they were the Ravens, or they are the Ravens, they were just going to have a great defense. Because under Harbaugh, it's usually what they've had. It's just pencil it in. The Ravens are going to have at least a top 15, 14 defense. But two second half timeouts called on the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens is just inexcusable. First of all, you shouldn't be calling those timeouts at all, in my opinion. Using second half timeouts for anything except stopping the clock when the other team is trying to kill the clock is stupid to me. And that happened yesterday as well in the Eagles-Packers game, where the Eagles had to use a couple timeouts in the second half in the wrong situation, which could have came back to bite them, and almost did. But 7 penalties against the Ravens. This isn't just against their defensive side of the ball. 4 illegal formation penalties. And I understand that a couple of them probably weren't illegal formation penalties looking back at the footage. But I listened to every single Dan Campbell press conference, head coach of the Detroit Lions. And he mentioned that after the last preseason game, that the refs really made a point of emphasis to the different organizations, or I should say the league did, that these illegal formation penalties for the tackle being a bit more behind the line of scrimmage, those calls are going to get made more often this season. So they were given a warning, and yet and still they lined up as they would and got caught for it. Now that's coaching. Like, the first time, fine, player error. The second time, maybe like 3-4 times, I question that coaching staff a little bit. Their special teams coordinator, awful communication on that touchdown by Xavier Worthy. The linebacker clearly thought he had safety help. He played a flat, and the guy just ran past him. It wasn't man coverage. He clearly thought it was a cloud zone. And also, another coaching point on defense that I just didn't understand for the Ravens, like, the number one rule in man coverage, especially as a linebacker, is don't let a guy cross your face. If he goes to the outside, that's fine. You still have contain on him and you can get an arm. If he crosses your face, you're dead. Rashee Rice got 100+ yards just off of shallow routes. And if you don't know what a shallow route is, it's basically just a cross over the middle of the field. It's not a tricky concept to understand, but yet and still, he just kept going back to that shallow from the slot. And for some reason, the Ravens didn't understand that you have to shade him to the outside to prevent that. I didn't understand that coaching. I didn't understand a lot of what the Ravens did, to be honest. It looked like the Ravens coaches were as afraid of the Chiefs coaches as the Ravens players are afraid of the Chiefs players. To me, it feels like an organizational mental warfare game that the Chiefs are dominating. And we always think, again, for some reason, that when these coordinators leave, these great coordinators leave teams, that it'll all just be okay if the head coach has a history of getting that side of the ball right. But it's just not the truth. So the Ravens defense is a concern. If I was a Ravens fan, I would be scared. Not necessarily because of their personnel, but defense has a lot to do with your head coach. Or not your head coach, sorry, your defensive coordinator or head coach if he's a defensive head coach. But the Ravens need to get their act together on defense, communication-wise, and just fundamentally. So the Chiefs are clearly at least somewhat in Lamar's head, just like they are the Ravens coaches, in my opinion. Like, the amount of times that he would put his shoulder down to get an extra inch or two, it felt like it was the AFC Championship game instead of the literal first game of the NFL season. Now, you could say, he's putting his body on the line for his guys. He should be doing that every game. And my argument would be, no, he shouldn't. Like, you, as a franchise quarterback, I have the same issue with Josh Allen. You can't be putting your shoulder down and taking these unnecessary hits just trying to get an extra 6 inches on the play. It's just not smart for your long-term health and the long-term future of your franchise. I know it seems like a selfless play in the moment, but long-term, it's a selfish play. It really is, because these guys, these other 52 people on the roster, are relying on you to be their quarterback. And I don't think if this was against the Chargers, he would be doing those same kind of plays. But because it's the Chiefs and because he's so desperate to beat Mahomes, he's playing like he really, really, like he wants to win it too much. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's how I feel. He's not letting the game come to him. He's trying to force the issue. And allowing the game to come to him is exactly what Mahomes has slowly but surely become an absolute master at. And this is what Brady just perfected at the end of his career. Don't let your team lose. Then you can focus on trying to get your team to win. But a lot more games are lost than they are won. That was an old Patriots motto. To win, first you have to learn how not to lose. And Mahomes has learned how not to lose better than any quarterback I've seen since Tom Brady. And listen, whenever I bet against the guy, which I just don't do anymore, but when I used to, it just always feels like you have a losing hand. It always feels like he's just going to make one extra play if he needs to. And most of the time, he doesn't need to. But when he does, he does. And there's just no one like him in the NFL right now. Speaking of, whoa, that was interesting. Excuse me. The refs were questionable all game in the Chiefs-Ravens game. There's no doubt about it. But specifically that one call I want to point out where Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, called a timeout. He's not allowed to do that. Coordinators aren't allowed to call timeouts. The head coach is allowed to call a timeout, or a player with a C on his chest, most notably the quarterback. Those guys are allowed to call timeouts. Other than that, nope, you're not allowed. Either they will ignore it and not allow you to call a timeout or give you a 10-yard penalty for delay a game. They did neither. They literally just allowed him to call the timeout illegally with no repercussions. That was just unbelievable to me. But I want to transition because speaking of refs, that Packers-Eagles game, they had so many calls and it was such a sloppy game that the head referee legitimately lost his voice by the end of the game, which I thought was hilarious. Maybe he didn't lose his voice, but it was definitely parched by the end. I'll tell you that for sure. My biggest takeaway from this was Jalen Hurts did not look good throwing the football to me. He had 2 picks that could have easily been 4. And on the 2 picks that he did have that counted, both of them were just like, what are you doing? Kind of interceptions. Like that throw to Devontae Smith up the seam into triple coverage. Like I would maybe understand the logic if that was like Jimmy Graham or Sam Laporta or like a big tight end where you try to fit that into that window. But to Devontae Smith, 170 pound, 6 foot, 5'11 Devontae Smith. That's just an awful decision. And the other interception where he tried to direct traffic back to the right, that legitimately looked like he was aiming for the safety. It was bad. And I thought he made a couple of throws where he just looked more like a college quarterback than an NFL quarterback. But he did what Jalen Hurts has done for really his entire career. He made plays when they counted. And that first down with 3 minutes left where he took 3 Packers defenders on his back was unbelievably impressive. And listen, to end the game, they had to have at least 2 first downs. I audibly disagreed when they decided to throw the ball. I said, "Why are you throwing it?" I said that out loud. And he completed them both because they got schemed open. And I thought Kellen Moore had a really good game, by the way, as the Eagles' new offensive coordinator. I thought he was smart. I thought that play where he sent Saquon on a wheel through the B gap was an incredibly smart play. Obviously, that ended up in a touchdown. I thought Kellen Moore had a really good game, and Jalen Hurts made plays when they counted. Now, as for the Packers and Jordan Love, I think he's going to be okay. The injury that he had actually looked very similar to an injury that I had a couple of years ago, where it was a dislocated kneecap, and that had me out for about 2 months, which means I think he'll be back in about a month and a half. If there's any ACL damage, obviously, I'm not a doctor. I have no idea. But he was standing, walking around on it. He looked pretty mobile. I don't think this is worst case scenario for Packers fans. But as for how he played in the game last night, I thought he looked awesome. I thought he looked really good. I thought his accuracy was much improved for most of the game. I still think his footwork is so shaky. You're not Aaron Rodgers. Set your feet like every other quarterback in NFL history has done. He does a little bit too much of that back foot stuff for me. But his reads were crisp overall. I thought he was accurate. Besides 3 or 4 plays that a guy with only 19 starts might make, he had obviously an awful interception, very kind of similar to what Hurts had on that Devontae Smith interception, actually. And he had a couple balls where he just threw it into the dirt and, just a couple of weird plays. But again, you would expect that from a guy who only has 19 career starts and really only 9 career starts where he's played like Jordan Love. Lastly, I want to finish off with a preview of this Lions versus Rams Sunday Night Football game because I think the line in Vegas has moved the wrong way for me. It's moved from 3 to 3.5 all the way up to 4.5 now in favor of the Lions. And as a Lions fan, I think I am in the perfect position to say that's absolutely ridiculous. These Rams, I think, are going to be in contention for number 1 seed in their division, potentially number 1 seed in the NFC. I love what they have on both sides of the ball. I think their pass rush is a little bit weaker than need be for this Lions offense. And I totally understand why the Lions would be favored in this game, but anything more than a field goal against this Rams team is just crazy to me. Now, I think the Lions from top to bottom, 1 to 53, clearly have the better roster at pretty much every spot. They clearly have the better offensive line. I think they have better weapons. I think their secondary is much improved and probably will be better than the Rams is this year, especially if Kobe Turner is limited at all this game. I also think that their defensive line, like I mentioned, is better than the Rams. But as I always say, the 2 most important positions in football, quarterback, head coach. Head coach isn't a position, 2 most important jobs, whatever you want to say. Those 2 are the most important. And when you have Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford on your team, you have a chance to win. And Sean McVay is 6-1 in week 1. I think he's undefeated against the spread. And typically with great offensive coaches, Andy Reid is another example, Kyle Shanahan, they have all summer to draw up their offense, scheme up their plays, understand what they want to do. And they come out week 1 and just let it all loose. And I totally expect the Rams to come into this game with blood in their eyes after what happened in the last playoff game where Stafford came back to Detroit and had a very unceremonious night, to be honest with you. His kids got booed, according to him, not according to anyone else. His wife was clearly upset about it. He lost the game. Detroit booed him the entire time, chanted Jared Goff. It went about as poorly as you could expect a game to go for Matthew Stafford. So I think he comes back with a fire under his ass for sure. And I think this is a field goal game. I still take the Lions because, again, I think the roster is better from top to bottom. 4.5 points against Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford is unbelievable to me. That is, I can't bet on it because I'm never going to bet against my favorite team. If you do that, like, come on, get your act together. You're just a schnauze. But I do think this is a field goal game that the Lions take home. The line is crazy though. If you don't have any allegiances to either team, bet on the Rams plus 4.5. And I want to finish this with a funny thought I had yesterday, but I wanted to share it because I have had an issue with field goal kickers since I've been watching football. Every time I'm in a fantasy league, I asked for them to be taken out because I think the concept of having this, I don't want to say non-athlete, but this very specific type of athlete, unlike any other football player on the 53-man roster, coming out and having his foot decide football games is bonkers to me. After these 11 men versus 11 men go to war for 59 minutes and 59 seconds, this little 5'6" white dude walks onto the field and it's up to him to decide who wins the game. Like, I just think it's stupid. Like, honestly, I think it's dumb. Kicking a ball through an upright should not decide an American football game. So I have an idea for how to fix it. And it isn't to remove field goal kicking at all, because only touchdowns in a football game, it sounds fun, but it would get low scoring so quickly with these teams going for it in the red zone. I don't think it would be as much fun as people think it would. So keep kicking. It adds also a great element of TV drama for all of the wrong reasons. There's no doubt about it. So what I think is, instead of having kickers be, a position just like any other position, come out of college, you draft them, sign them, whatever. Kickers should be former NFL players. Here's what I mean. These kickers aren't looked at as football players. So we take actual football players and turn them into kickers because they would have paid their dues as football players. There's a bunch of football players who retire or can't make a team very early and need some extra money. Go train and learn how to kick a football. And the amount of drama that would bring as well would be fantastic. And I just think, like, having actual football player athletes decide these games just makes more sense than these random soccer players coming out and doing it. Now, this idea is totally out there. I understand it is never, ever going to happen. And it might be a complete half-baked thought. I don't know. But football players deciding games sounds right to me. And like I said, there are a bunch of retired guys who I'm sure would love to be back in an NFL locker room any way they can. And I'm sure there's plenty of NFL players who have maybe a secret kicking talent. You never know. Now, will there be enough interest for, rosters to be filled out with former NFL player kickers? Probably not. Again, very half-baked idea. But if the league could find some way to figure out a way for football players to decide football games all of the time, that would be fantastic. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I would love to know, what did you guys think of the episode today? Am I crazy? Probably. Please let me know in the comments below. I love responding to all comments whenever I get a chance to. I'm small enough as to where I can read all of them, so put it down below. Please subscribe if you enjoyed what you heard. Please leave a like on the video. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Peace out.